big name in show business came out for Kamala Harris, from Oprah to Clooney to Beyonce, and she lost every swing state. A survey of Ohio voters found Taylor Swift's endorsement actually had a negative impact, with 24% saying it made them less enthusiastic about her as a candidate. Celebrities aren't helping, and why would they? In a country where the big issue now is affordability, outside of, Springsteen and a few others, celebrities don't strike people as relatable or in touch, and what their activism mostly activates is eye roll.
The applause faded, and what remained was exposure. On Real Time, Bill Maher didn't fire at Republicans. He turned the spotlight inward and asked the question that makes consultants sweat. When did a political movement start mistaking a premier for a primary? In that moment, he positioned himself not as a partisan, but as a truth-teller challenging a system addicted to aesthetics. According to voting trends across recent federal cycles, working-class turnout in pivotal swing states softened even as celebrity-driven online engagement exploded, a digital surge that looked powerful on screens but thin at ballot boxes. Calmly, surgically, the data suggests a substitution effect. Ground persuasion was replaced by glossy amplification. The villain here isn't fame, it's dependency, the decision to trade conversations in union halls for cameos on red carpets. Strategically, the shift from people to performance carries risk. Based on exit polls and demographic shifts, swing voters consistently prioritize cost of living, border security, and public safety over cultural symbolism. When campaigns elevate star endorsements above economic specificity, they unintentionally signal detachment, not malice, but miscalibration. Now, to be fair, celebrity surrogates can mobilize younger demographics and supercharge fundraising pipelines. In presidential cycles especially, they can widen awareness. But mobilization without persuasion is fragile power. Real enthusiasm converts, manufactured momentum evaporates. Psychologically, voters don't resent celebrities, they resent being sidelined. When politics feels curated, voters feel peripheral. And once people suspect they're watching a production instead of participating in a movement, trust thins quietly. The future trend is clear. Authenticity is becoming political currency in an era of institutional distrust. If campaigns continue to blur the line between authentic conviction and staged solidarity, the backlash won't arrive as outrage, it will arrive as absence. The question isn't whether star power shines. The question is whether it blinds.
Stars, they're not just like us. They're just not. They fly private. They have 5 houses all over the world. They give their kids ridiculous names. They make candles that smell like their vagina. They wear crazy amounts of jewelry. They buy castles. They buy towns. They buy islands.
The room didn't erupt, it recalibrated. On Real Time, Bill Maher stepped into dangerous territory, not by attacking the opposition, but by accusing his own side of confusing applause with authority. He argued that somewhere along the line, cultural validation started masquerading as electoral strength, that a standing ovation in Hollywood was treated like persuasion in Ohio. According to exit polls and demographic shifts across recent cycles, swing voters consistently rank inflation, crime, and border stability above symbolic cultural fights. Calmly, almost surgically, the numbers reveal a gap. Viral visibility does not equal ballot durability. The villain isn't celebrity support itself, it's the strategic illusion that elite affirmation equals broad consent to here's the counterpoint. Celebrity voices can widen awareness and energize fragmented coalitions, especially among younger and urban voters. In high-turnout presidential years, that surge can matter. But based on data from recent election cycles, awareness without resonance fails to convert undecided voters in competitive districts. This is the real versus fake divide, authentic engagement versus manufactured spectacle, people versus performance. When campaigns spotlight famous faces while families are calculating grocery bills, the contrast becomes combustible. Not because voters hate celebrities, but because they crave relevance. Psychologically, detachment stings more than disagreement. Voters can forgive policy differences. They struggle to forgive the feeling of being unseen. The strategic danger isn't backlash, it's withdrawal. Disengagement is quiet, incremental, and lethal in close elections. If this trajectory continues, the trend suggests further erosion among middle-income and working-class blocs who interpret performance politics as proof of distance. And once distance hardens into distrust, rebuilding credibility becomes exponentially harder. The real question isn't who gets the loudest applause, it's who earns the last vote.
Late for their own concerts, and people still go. Please, it's okay, you're stars. We like you for who you are. Insulated divas whose talent allows you to pig out on the finer things in life, because we all need something to aspire to. But being talented, which you are, isn't the same as knowing things or having the credibility to advise people on their...
The shift wasn't explosive, it was surgical. On Real Time, Bill Maher identified something more dangerous than scandal, a credibility gap built not on corruption, but on curation. He cast himself as the inconvenient truth-teller confronting a political machine that mistook proximity to fame for proximity to voters. The villain wasn't ideology, it was over-reliance, the strategic decision to outsource authenticity to celebrity surrogates rather than earn it through lived connection. According to data from recent election cycles, candidates in competitive districts who centered hyperlocal economic messaging consistently outperformed those who leaned heavily on national celebrity endorsements. Calmly, analytically, the pattern suggests a substitution error. Amplification replaced alignment. Now, here's the counterpoint. Star power can widen reach and spike turnout, particularly in presidential years where enthusiasm gaps matter. Based on voting trends among younger demographics, celebrity engagement does correlate with short-term mobilization. But mobilization is not persuasion, and persuasion is what wins swing terrain. This is the real versus fake divide, authentic trust built through shared struggle versus manufactured momentum built through borrowed spotlight. Influence borrowed is influence fragile. When campaigns project performance over presence, voters sense the imbalance. Psychologically, people measure sincerity through sacrifice, not selfies. They don't resent fame, they resent distance. And when politics feels curated for cameras rather than grounded in community, emotional detachment begins. The long-term consequence is brand erosion, a party seen as culturally dominant yet economically disconnected. If that perception hardens, rebuilding trust will require more than endorsements, it will require recalibration. Because in the end, elections aren't won by who stands beside you on stage, they're won by who believes you stand beside them.
But you avail yourself of the greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
The battle line wasn't drawn against the opposition. It was drawn against complacency. On Real Time, Bill Maher framed the conflict as an internal war, not of ideology but of strategy, accusing his own political camp of hiding behind celebrity armor instead of marching into uncomfortable conversations. He cast himself as the lone truth-teller stepping into friendly fire, arguing that endorsement replaced engagement, affirmation replaced persuasion. According to historical midterm patterns and voting trends across the last 2 decades, parties perceived as culturally dominant yet economically detached often face sharper electoral corrections. Calmly, almost clinically, the data suggests a perception gap. Visibility without relatability weakens coalition durability. The villain wasn't fame, it was insulation. Strategically, celebrity politics can function as a shield, deflecting criticism while amplifying brand identity. And to be fair, star endorsements can consolidate base enthusiasm and generate fundraising momentum. Based on recent election cycle data, celebrity-backed digital campaigns have successfully boosted small-dollar contributions in urban districts. But money is not message discipline, and spectacle is not structural strength. This is the real versus fake divide, authentic dialogue versus manufactured validation, people versus performance. When campaigns substitute curated applause for contested debate, they risk signaling distance from everyday struggle. Psychologically, voters rarely resent success, they resent exclusion. When politics begins to resemble a VIP lounge, curated, glamorous, self-congratulatory, the public doesn't necessarily rebel. They withdraw. And withdrawal is politically lethal. The future trend suggests that in an era of rising economic anxiety, tolerance for perceived elitism will shrink further. If leaders fail to recalibrate toward grounded authenticity, the next correction won't feel like outrage, it will feel like erosion. Because in the end, power insulated too long forgets what it was built to represent.
The real world. So Democrats, it's great you have all the big celebs, but people see them as an arm of the Democratic Party, which they already suspect for lacking common sense. I know the celebrities mean well, and we thank them for having their heart in the right place, but just do you. Do what you do so well. Use your extraordinary talents for the noble cause of bringing relief from the problems that ribbons and pins can't fix. I know it's very important to you that you feel that you're making a difference, so let me assure you, you are. You're making independence.
The warning wasn't about Hollywood, it was about habit. On Real Time, Bill Maher didn't ridicule celebrities. He exposed a growing dependency on them, a strategic addiction to spotlight over substance. He framed himself as the inconvenient voice inside the tent, arguing that performance politics has become a dopamine loop, viral spikes replacing durable trust, applause replacing accountability. The villain isn't star power. It's the substitution of spectacle for structure. According to turnout data in suburban swing counties and recent election cycles, campaigns centered on pragmatic messaging about inflation, education, and local governance consistently narrowed margins more effectively than those dominated by national cultural figures. Calmly, surgically, the numbers show a pattern. Voters reward proximity to their problems, not proximity to fame. Now, the counterpoint matters. Celebrity engagement can energize fragmented coalitions and accelerate small-dollar fundraising, especially in media-saturated presidential cycles. Based on voting trends among younger demographics, cultural influencers can amplify awareness at scale. But amplification is not alignment. This is the real versus fake divide, authentic leadership built slowly through granular policy focus versus manufactured momentum engineered for headlines. Real leadership is methodical, sometimes unglamorous, often invisible. Manufactured energy is loud, cinematic, and fragile. Psychologically, people don't want to be entertained by power, they want to be represented by it. When representation starts to feel like a production, faith begins to erode quietly. Not in protest, but in patience lost. The forward trend suggests that as economic pressures intensify, tolerance for perceived performance politics will shrink. If campaigns continue prioritizing viral moments over lived connection, the collapse won't be dramatic, it will be incremental and compounding. Because in the end, trust is not built in a spotlight. It's built in the shadows where cameras rarely point.
Of some of your favorite stars and politicians who speak about the need to reduce our carbon footprint, but who are always on private planes. That's right, all of them. If you don't see a celebrity's picture here, it's because we weren't allowed to use it. Or their series got canceled. But all the environmentalists of Hollywood and Washington do it. Their position on climate change is, we must do more to stop pouring carbon into the air, except for me when I want to go somewhere and then I take a...
The line landed like a verdict. Voters can smell inauthenticity faster than consultants can manufacture it. On Real Time, Bill Maher framed the battlefield not as left versus right, but as real versus fake, authentic conviction versus manufactured consensus. He positioned himself as the internal critic willing to say what strategists won't. When messaging feels scripted to perfection, it often feels distant from reality. According to polling analysis across the last 2 election cycles, Institutional trust has declined across party lines, with independents showing the steepest erosion. Calmly, surgically, the data indicates that in low-trust environments, authenticity becomes the primary currency of persuasion. The villain here isn't celebrity involvement, it's the perception of orchestration, the sense that politics is stage-managed by elites rather than shaped by citizens. Now, to be fair, high-profile endorsements can amplify critical issues and mobilize disengaged voters, particularly in fragmented media ecosystems. Based on demographic shifts and turnout data, cultural influences can widen awareness among younger voters who distrust traditional political figures. But awareness without intimacy does not rebuild trust. This is people versus performance. When campaigns appear overly curated, even well-intentioned messages risk sounding transactional. Authenticity cannot be focus grouped into existence. Psychologically, the damage is quiet but compounding. When voters feel like an audience rather than participants, they don't riot, they retreat. Disengagement becomes the protest. The forward trend suggests that in an era of collapsing institutional confidence, any signal of artificiality accelerates voter fatigue. If political movements continue leaning on spectacle in a trust recession, the long-term consequence won't be louder opposition, it will be thinner loyalty. And once loyalty thins, even small storms can feel like collapse. The question is simple. In a country tired of being marketed to, who will dare to speak without a script?
And Greta, that's who walks the walk. Everyone else is full of shit, and I'm done being full of shit. I can take being a bad environmentalist because almost all of us are, but I can't take being a hypocrite. Now, I always justified renting a plane because I only used it for work and literally could not get to most of my stand-up gigs on time any other way. How do you think I did it all those years? I said goodnight here at 8 p.m. and was on stage in Vegas at 10. But I don't need to do stand-up, like tomorrow night in Albuquerque.
The shift wasn't a revolt, it was a recalibration. On Real Time, Bill Maher framed the backlash not as chaos, but as correction, the electorate adjusting its aim after years of drift. He cast himself as the internal sentinel warning that systems, when left insulated, lose altitude. According to voting trends and demographic realignment data across multiple battleground states, blue-collar and minority voters have shifted in small but measurable percentages over recent cycles, not in landslides, but in increments powerful enough to tilt outcomes. Calmly, surgically, the numbers suggest movement at the margins, and margins decide wars. The villain isn't celebrity politics alone, it's tone-deaf timing, projecting glamour during economic strain, spotlight during scarcity. Now, the counterpoint matters. Economic pressure, cultural polarization, and media fragmentation all play massive roles in voter migration. Based on exit polls and issue priority surveys, inflation and public safety consistently outrank cultural symbolism as motivating concerns. Celebrity engagement is not the root cause of realignment. But when messaging leans theatrical while households feel squeezed, the contrast sharpens. This is real versus fake, people versus performance. Authentic hardship colliding with curated optimism can feel dismissive, even when intentions are sincere. Psychologically, voters don't always articulate resentment, they internalize it. They sense imbalance. They sense distance. And once that perception sets, correction becomes inevitable. The future trend suggests continued volatility among working class and minority blocs if campaigns fail to recalibrate tone and focus. Political timing is not cosmetic. It is strategic oxygen. Miss the moment, and momentum suffocates. The question isn't whether systems drift, they always do. The question is whether leaders recognize the drift before voters complete the correction.
Commercial. Why don't they? Ask anyone who tried to get home for Christmas last year. And don't tell me the younger generation is better. They're not. They're just poorer. They're actually worse. This is who they look up to. The family where everyone has their own private jet. And kids love Bitcoin, which, to determine the value of, takes an amount of computer processing that uses more electricity than some whole countries. Kids could have rejected that, but they didn't. They love it. Why? Because they want to be rich. Why? So they can fly private.
The danger wasn't immediate defeat, it was slow corrosion. On Real Time, Bill Maher delivered a warning that cut past headlines and into legacy. When a political party becomes visually fused with celebrity culture, it risks branding itself as elite in a country that distrusts elites. He framed himself as the internal alarm bell, calling out a system drifting toward optics over oxygen. The villain wasn't fame itself, it was strategic overexposure, allowing opponents to weaponize imagery of red carpets and private jets against kitchen table campaigns. According to campaign finance reports and turnout comparisons across recent election cycles, grassroots-driven messaging often correlates with stronger down-ballot resilience than top-heavy, star-centered strategies. Calmly, surgically, the data shows that spectacle spikes attention, but trust sustains margins. Now, the counterpoint deserves air. Celebrity involvement can nationalize races, drive small-dollar surges, and inject cultural energy into otherwise stagnant campaigns. Based on voting trends in high turnout cycles, star amplification has, at times, expanded coalition awareness. But awareness is not insulation. This is real versus fake, authentic infrastructure versus manufactured momentum. Political capital built on spectacle depreciates quickly when economic headwinds rise. Capital built on relational trust compounds slowly but endures shocks. Psychologically, perception becomes reality faster than policy becomes results. When voters internalize the image of a party as culturally elevated yet economically distant, every glamorous association reinforces that narrative, fair or not. The long-term trend suggests that brand identity in politics now travels at algorithm speed, and once hardened, it calcifies. If credibility erodes at the margins, rebuilding it demands years, not weeks. Because in the end, the most dangerous loss isn't a seat, it's the story voters start telling about who you really represent.
John Kerry is our climate czar, and he uses a private jet. It's like if the Secretary of Homeland Security smuggled drugs in his butt. People take jets to environmental conferences. If you could run TED Talks on hypocrisy.
The air didn't crack with anger. It trembled with frustration. On Real Time, Bill Maher positioned himself as the voice urging recalibration, arguing that Democrats once excelled at translating policy into lived experience, but have since drifted into aesthetic symbolism. He framed the battlefield as real versus curated, authentic versus staged, people versus performance. Calmly, analytically, longitudinal polling data reveals that voters respond more strongly to candidates who outline concrete policy trade-offs than to those who rely on abstract moral positioning or high-concept branding. The villain isn't ambition or vision, it's the substitution of spectacle for substance, a slow drift toward a world where optics replace connection. Here's the counterpoint. Well-crafted branding and narrative can unify disparate coalitions and signal cultural relevance. According to voting trends among younger, digitally engaged demographics, symbolic alignment can catalyze early enthusiasm and social media amplification. But amplification without intimacy is hollow. Psychologically, voters don't crave perfection, they crave honesty. And when campaigns hide behind curated images, the void doesn't go unnoticed, suspicion fills it. The forward-looking consequence is subtle but serious. Repeated over-reliance on performance erodes trust, particularly among persuadable swing voters. In the end, politics is less about who shines on stage and more about who proves they stand beside the people when no cameras are watching. By the final frame, Maher's warning wasn't about a single campaign, it was about trajectory. On Real Time, he framed the narrative as a cautionary tale. Celebrity politics can dazzle, but headlines never substitute for loyalty. He cast himself as the sentinel observing a system at risk of substitution. Performance over presence, optics over authenticity. According to data from recent election cycles and longitudinal voter trend analysis, future battlegrounds will be won less by cultural endorsements and more by economic credibility and perceived authenticity. Calmly, surgically, the insight is clear. Mobilization without resonance narrows coalitions, leaving victories shallow and ephemeral. The counterpoint deserves acknowledgement. Celebrity surrogates can spark turnout, especially among younger, digitally engaged voters and can inject energy into stagnant campaigns. Based on voting trends and demographic engagement metrics, well-timed endorsements can accelerate awareness and enthusiasm. But enthusiasm alone does not translate into trust or durable persuasion. This is the real versus fake divide, people versus performance. Psychologically, voters notice when they are being performed to, and when that perception hardens, withdrawal begins quietly but decisively. The long-term trend signals a warning. If politics continues to favor spectacle over substance, the audience will eventually tune out. And when they do, it won't be in uproar. It will be in absence, in disengagement, in ballots left uncast. Maher's strategic takeaway is simple. Performance politics may earn applause, but it cannot earn allegiance. In the end, the question is not who grabs the spotlight, but who earns the trust that survives the spotlight's fade.